How about today we create this render? Super simple, super fast. So without any time waste, let's start. In our default scene, we're going to press X to delete the default cube, Shift A, and search for a cylinder. Now we don't require the cylinder to have this much geometry, so we're just going to go ahead and expand the menu at the bottom left and change the number of vertices to something like 12. We will be adding a ton of subdivision surface modifiers to this, so that's all right. Now we're going to scale this up on the z-axis by something like 20, and we're going to press tab to go into edit mode and press Ctrl R to get the loop cuts, and just place our cursor to get a loop cut like this and type in 100 or a number to get just enough geometry. I'll stick with 100 for today. Now the next thing is I want the top and the bottom to pinch down. So I will press 2, or you can use this button over here to get into edge select mode, and then Control Shift click to get the entire ring selected, and then tap O to switch on proportional editing. The button is up here, and then you can press scale, and you can just use your scroll wheel to increase the size of this circle or the influence bar and just drag it down and get it a nice tapering feel like that. You can do the same thing for the bottom. So deselect everything, Alt Shift click to get the entire ring, scale, and bring it down. Once you're happy with that, you can press tab to go back into object mode and then apply a curve modifier. Now for the curve modifier, we require a curve object, so we're going to press Shift A, and under the curves we're going to search for a circle. We're going to rotate the circle on the x-axis by 90 degrees, and we're just going to scale it up by something like 8. Once you have that scaled up, we can select our original cylinder, and for the curve object we can select the curve object that we just created. Now it's not going to be deforming correctly, and that's because we have to change the deform axis to Y, and once it's on Y we get this particular shape. Now of course, if you don't have it at the right size, you can always scale it on the Z and just move it so that you get this nice shape that comes in. We don't require it to go all the way, we don't require it to be below, just any size would be fine for now. Once you're happy with it, you can go ahead and add in a new modifier, which is going to be the displace modifier. Once you've added it in, press new to add in a new texture, and then go to the texture tab over here and then change the type from image or movie to clouds. Once you have that, you see it's stretched way too much in the Z axis, and that's because we haven't applied the scale. So press Ctrl A and apply scale. So now you have your nice clouds texture, and you can play around with the size. So I think I'm just going to keep the size at 1 for now, because we're actually going to change the size based on an object really soon. So back in the modifiers properties, we're going to change the coordinates from local to object, and now we need one object to change the coordinates. So we're going to add in an empty, so Shift A, empty, plane axes, and then again select our cylinder, and for the object we'll select our empty. We can go ahead and add in a subdivision surface modifier to our cylinder so that we can just see everything better. And of course, we're going to change the levels view to something like 3, and also under object we're going to go ahead and press shade smooth. So once you have this, you can select your empty and just scale it on different axes to see what looks the best. And in my situation, I'm actually going to scale it on the Z axis down to 0.001 to get the shape that I'm looking for. Along with that, I'm just going to scale this up on the Z axis a little bit more, and there we have it. Now we don't actually require the bottom half of this, so I'm just going to add in a ground plane that's going to hide that. So let's search for a mesh plane, scale this up by 10 units, and then we can scale it on the Y by another 5 units. And also obviously we don't want it to start off halfway behind. We can just grab it on the Y, make sure to press Ctrl so that it snaps to grid, and just snap it to the start. We can press 7 to go to the top view and precisely place this right at the junction. There we have it. Now that you have this, you can go ahead and take your light and then press Alt G to clear its location, then grab it on the Z axis and just move it up to some position like that. And we can take these 3 objects and place them into a collection, and we can instance that collection. But if you want some more variety, you can go ahead and just duplicate these, make changes, and then add all of those to a collection. So what we'll do is we'll press 3 to go into the orthographic right view, and then press Alt D to create a linked duplicate and just move it by 1 unit on the Y. This is actually 10 units. And then we can press Shift R to repeat the process. Press Shift R, and we're going to do this till there are 10 objects. Once you have 10 objects, you can go ahead and select all of them. So B, select all of them, and add these to a new collection. So we'll press M, new collection, and we'll call this maybe something like rings. Once you're done with that, you can go ahead and make the changes to each object individually. So this one, I'll just scale it down on the Z axis. This one also, maybe I'll scale it down. This one, maybe I'll scale up. And just like that, randomize these by scaling them on the Z axis by pressing SZ and just moving them around a little bit. So once you've made changes to all of them just to get a little bit of variation, you can go ahead and place your camera So select your camera, press Alt G, Alt R, then RX 90, G, Z, and bring it up to just about there. And then press 0 to go into your camera view. And with the camera selected itself, go to the camera properties, change the focal length to something like 25, just so that you have a broader field of view. And then you can adjust the height by grabbing it on the Z axis to something that you prefer. I'm going to keep it fairly low on the ground. And also you can go to the viewport display and increase passport out all the way to 1 so that anything outside the camera does not distract you. The next thing is that we want the floor to be scaled enough on the x-axis such that we don't see the edge of the floor. So let's just scale it on the x-axis. Just move it aside till there. So maybe scaling it by 6 will be enough. Once you're happy with that, we can go ahead and actually instance this particular collection. So we can press Shift A, collection instance, and just choose ring, and now grab that on the y-axis till it perfectly aligns. And you can do that again. So Shift A, collection instance, rings, G, Y, till it perfectly aligns. And I think 3 instances should be enough, and that's because we're using a fairly large scale and the last few are completely clipped off of our camera view itself. So now what you have to do is actually animate the camera. So let's select our camera, press 7 to go to the top view, increase our timeline a little bit, go to frame 0, press I, location, rotation, scale, or just location will do. And we have to increase the length of our animation for 10 seconds. So it's going to be ending on frame 300. So go to frame 300 and then grab it on the y-axis till it perfectly matches up with the next plane, which is going to be 100 meters away, and then press I, location. And this is going to be by default Bezier. You don't want it to be Bezier, so we're going to have to press A to select both the keyframes, T to open up this menu, and then choose linear. So now if you actually press 0 to go into your camera view, you should get a perfectly looping animation. Now the circles at the back are going to keep coming in as they come into the clip area of your camera. You can leave that as is, and I think that will work good enough because most of it won't be seen that well due to the bloom of whatever central object we add in anyway. If you don't want that, you have to add in some sort of a haze or some sort of a filter to make it slowly fade in and fade out of our scene. However, we're not going to be doing that because it's already been taught in various videos. You can actually check that out in a video over here in the top right corner, which will also be linked in the description, and many other videos like this are there on my channel, so you can check them out from there. Now the last thing we need to do is add in our main object of focus, and we're going to press Shift A and search for a curved circle itself, rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees, and right now you won't be able to see it, so you can go out of your camera view and you'll see that it appeared right here. So you can grab it on the y-axis and just move it a bit in front, and then grab it on the z-axis and move it higher, and then press 0 and you should be able to see it. Now grab it down on the Z just to about the center and then scale it up. And once you're happy with it, under the curve properties, again, go ahead and set the resolution to something like 64 so that it's perfectly smooth, and expand the geometry tab, increase the depth to 0.02, and finally shift select the camera and press Ctrl P, set parent to object. So now it's essentially going to be following the camera as it moves along. So now what you can do is start off with the texturing. So we can select any one of our cylinders. Remember, we used Alt D, so all of them are going to automatically get the same materials. So if we add in a new material, go to the viewport shading of render, we can actually see changes. Just to make sure that everything is linked properly, we can go ahead and just change the base color to red, and we should see all of them change to red. And yes, since all of them are changing, we can go ahead and work with this material for now. Change the base color back to white by changing the saturation all the way to 0 and increasing the value to 1. After that, we can just scroll down to the roughness, and we can reduce the roughness to something like 0.2, and then we can press 0 to go into our camera view. Right now the lights I feel are way too bright, so we can select our lamp, change the power down to something like 300. Then we can select our ring, give it its new material, which is just going to be emissive. So we're going to go down to the emission, change the color to a bright red or green so that we make this a very toxic environment. So let's use a lemon green as we used for the hypnotic video. You can check out that hypnotic video right here. And we're going to increase the strength to something like 10. So right now you see nothing looks too good, and that's because we haven't switched on any of our animation defaults. Let's set all of them. In our render properties, we can switch on ambient occlusion to get our shadows better, switch on bloom, and then also switch on screen space reflections. Along with that, we can go to our output properties and change the frame rate to 30 frames per second, and we can change the output folder to wherever we want it to be, and also play around with the file format. The general one that we choose is FFmpeg video with an encoding set to MPEG-4 and the output quality as perceptually lossless. So now we can see the bloom, but everything is still too bright, so there's no reflections actually happening. We can go to the world properties and for now just reduce the color of the sky to something much lower, and along with that select any of our lights and just decrease the value even more. So we're going to make the power 100 watts, and now you can start seeing the screen space reflections of the green appear on the side walls, and that's exactly what we wanted. So I think we're going to reduce the power even more, make it something like 50, and then we have really nice reflections. I guess we'll have to make the brightness of this sphere even more, so go to the materials and increase the emission strength to 20, but that also overpowers the bloom. So we're going to go to our render properties and expand the bloom panel and just change the intensity to 0.02, and that should be fine for now. The next thing we want to do is work with our floor. So let's select the floor, change the timeline to a shader editor window, and just bring it up a little bit so that we can see it better. Press new to add in a new material for the floor. And now we essentially want some puddles and some rough details. So the rough details is going to come in from a noise texture, and the puddles is going to come from a Musgrave texture. And we have to combine both of them. So we're going to have individual control over both of them using color ramp nodes first. So we can place one color ramp node, press Shift D to duplicate it, and add in the second color ramp node, connect the height of the Musgrave into the factor of the color ramp, and the color of the noise texture into the factor of this color ramp. And to mix these, we're going to use a mix RGB node, but we're going to set it to multiply. So we go ahead and change it from mix to multiply, and then just plug in the color output of both the color ramps into color 1 and color 2. Now the output of this can go into the roughness value of our principal BSDF, and immediately you'll start seeing the changes. So right now you can tell the reflections are happening, but there's no puddles or anything, and that's because our planes are huge and we haven't changed the scales down here. So the first thing we have to do is press Ctrl A and apply the scale, and once you've applied the scale, you can go ahead and just increase the scale on the Musgrave and noise textures. So let's increase the Musgrave texture to something like 40, and you can start seeing the Musgrave texture come in. And since we want it to be puddles, we're going to increase the black value of the slider to make them even more rough, and of course reduce the white handle. And now you can see the rough areas are what looks more like puddles. So we'll go ahead and flip the color ramp and bring the white on this side and bring the black on this side. However, the shiny areas are not completely shiny, and that's because the mix RGB factor is not set to 1. So if we increase it all the way to 1, they're going to be completely shiny, and that's how you get your puddles. We want slightly larger puddles, so we're going to change the scale back to 30, and along with that we're going to go ahead and increase the scale of the noise texture to something like 200. Now we have noise present as well. Now for our actual principal BSDF, we're just going to go ahead and increase the metallic a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and change the base color to make it much darker. So that's going to be our floor. Now we need to actually play around with the color of our lights. So again, select any one of the lights, go to the light properties and change the color from white to something slightly greenish, and that should just help match with the scene. I also want the outsides of these pillars or whatever cylinders we created to be seen. So we're going to go out of the camera view, press 7 to go into the top view. And for each light, we're just going to hit Shift D, X, and move it over to this side completely. And similarly, Shift D, X, move it over to this side completely. Then press 1 to go into the front view. Select both the lights, grab them on the Z-axis, and then you can go ahead and increase the power to something like 100. Then press 7 to go into the top view, and press Alt D to create a linked duplicate and just bring it in front. And of course, Shift R will repeat that till it fills it in, but we want to just press 0 and go into the camera view to see and make sure that everything looks proper from this angle. And when I look at it, it does not look too great because our rocks now look very smooth and shiny. So in order to fix that, we have to give our rock some more of a texture. So for the roughness, we're just going to search for a Voronoi texture, and we're going to search for a color ramp, plug the color of the Voronoi texture into the factor of the color ramp, and plug the output into the roughness. Then you can increase the scale to something like 10, take the black and move it in, take the white and move it in, change the black from a black to a dark gray, and similarly you can take the white and change that from a white to something slightly darker, so a lighter gray. So I don't think the effects of the Voronoi is being seen too well. I've increased the scale all the way to 100, and that gives it more of the look that I was going for. However, it's still not exactly what I wanted, and instead of placing this Voronoi texture into the color ramp and the roughness, I'm actually going to search for a bump node, take the distance output from the Voronoi texture, plug that into the height, and plug that into the normal of the principal BSDF. Now the strength is way too much, so we're just going to change the strength to 0.1, and that gives it a much rougher look and just looks a bit better in my opinion. Alright, so my mic had gone off in the middle, so I just have to restart from that position onwards. So we settled on a strength on the bump at 0.2 to get it to look more like what we wanted, and after that the only thing that was left to do was actually work with the background, and we wanted the background to have some sort of clouds or something present. So we went ahead and changed the shader editor window from object to world, and initially the world was just a background node. However, all we did was add in a noise texture and pass that through a color ramp. We changed the color ramp colors to black and the lemon green, except the lemon green has a value much lower. So you can just see how we brought it down here. Along with that, we went ahead and increased the detail to 4 and the scale to 7 so that we could actually see the contrast come in. And also the actual strength of the background was generally 1, but we've set that down to 0.2 as well, so that it just looks like really dark clouds in the background but can actually be seen. After that, before actually rendering, we had to make sure that everything is actually looping, and if you could just press play and watch it happen, that would be the best. However, I have a lot of things running and my laptop cannot handle that at the moment, so we're just going to change to our timeline. And remember, for it to loop, frame number 0 and 300 should be the exact same. You can go back to frame number 0 and then come to this area over here and just type in 300 and press enter, and then you should at least eyeball and make sure that everything looks the exact same as it was, and I think it does, so that's perfect. Apart from that, I will just go to a few frames in the middle to actually see the puddles, and I feel like there's just not enough puddles actually present in this animation. So I will go back to the shader editor, go to my object and select the floor plane. And all I have to do to get bigger puddles, or at least more puddles, is increase this black slider over here so that there's just more black, and bring this white further behind. So that just increases the sizes of the puddles, as you can see. Along with that, I'm just going to slightly increase the contrast of our noise texture. So with that, the only thing left to do is for you to actually render out this animation, and you can simply do that by going up here and pressing render animation. Hopefully you learned something from this video and you can use this to create various other looping animations. Of course, my own channel has a lot of videos just like this one, and there are a lot more present on YouTube. They're really useful, and I'm sure that until the next video comes out, you're gonna stay creative.